many publishers, the explosive rise of free-to-play games promised near-endless earning potential, thanks to microtransactions providing extraordinary amounts of passive income. In 2021, for instance, Call of Duty publisher Activision's live service titles generated a staggering $5.1 billion from in-game purchases alone. The lucrative recurring revenue stream inspired other big-name publishing outfits to pursue the development of similar interactive experiences. A number of them chased the trend to their own detriment. Ubisoft, in particular, buckled beneath the weight of its high expectations in this respect, evidenced by the company canceling multiple work-in-progress games. However, even some titles that survived the culling and hit the market fell short. Such was the case with XDefiant. Ubisoft pulled the plug on XDefiant approximately 1 year after its release, the arena shooter's constantly diminishing user base playing a crucial role in the decision. Yet other obstacles contributed to its shortcomings as well, including netcode troubles, gameplay glitches, and allegedly inept leadership. Industry pundits and enthusiasts would argue the writing was on the wall before XDefiant officially went live in May 2024, considering the delays and long periods of uncertainty that beset its pre-release period. But the first-person shooter did enjoy some success at launch. The game broke a few records and, for a time, seemed as though it would test the loyalty of Call of Duty faithful. That ship sailed within months, though, leaving behind a compelling gameplay experience that never fully realized its potential. This is the tragedy of XDefiant. For 2+ decades, the Tom Clancy branding on a video game trained interested players to expect gritty and grounded military experiences. Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, even The Division wore the hallmarks of these tenets on their sleeves, until the lines suddenly began to blur. It started with the Operation Chimera expansion in Rainbow Six Siege, which infested the tactical shooter with alien creatures. By the time Ubisoft unveiled Tom Clancy's XDefiant, fans of Clancy-branded titles wanted nothing more than a return to basics. Rumblings about the project, codenamed BattleCat, first percolated in June 2021 when a leaker shared screenshots on social media and claimed they were from a new crossover game featuring Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, and The Division factions. VGC reporter Andy Robinson corroborated the leak, further describing BattleCat as a first-person shooter in the early stages of production. Ubisoft formally unveiled Tom Clancy's XDefiant 1 month later, with a reveal trailer promising 6v6 multiplayer action and a theme centered on fast-paced firefights meets punk rock mosh pit. Developer Ubisoft San Francisco built the free-to-play title's roster of characters based on different factions in the Tom Clancy universe. At launch then, players would suit up as Ghost Recon's Wolves, Echelon from Splinter Cell, and the Cleaners and Outcasts seen in The Division. These characters would be fully customizable too, kitted out with unique traits, abilities, ultra moves, and modifiable weapons. Arena battles and objective-based modes were listed as ways in which XDefiant would challenge users across casual and competitive matches. Previously, Ubisoft San Francisco had made a name for itself by leading development on Rocksmith and South Park: The Fractured Butthole, yet boasted no experience in the online shooter space. That's where Call of Duty veteran Mark Rubin came in, lending his expertise to the studio's first multiplayer shooter in the role of executive producer, while South Park's game director Jason Schroeder served as creative director. But neither these pedigrees nor the team's reassurances about prioritizing gunplay could temper the outcry fueled by the use of the Tom Clancy trademark. Some frustrated fans labeled XDefiant a money grab with Tom's name slapped on it. Others called Ubisoft out of touch. Harsher critiques said the publisher had destroyed the Tom Clancy name and game franchise. Suffice it to say, XDefiant's creators faced an uphill battle as soon as it entered the public consciousness. Still, Ubisoft remained steadfast in its commitment to delivering a new live service experience, evidenced by its hosting the first public test sessions in August 2021. But the fan backlash lingered, pushing Ubisoft to rebrand by dropping the Tom Clancy moniker. In March 2022, the shooter re-emerged with only the XDefiant name attached, though in-game factions were still modeled after Ubisoft's Clancy IP. And with that, XDefiant went dark for a while, communications drying up, minus the San Francisco studio sharing information regarding future playtests and confirming the lack of skill-based matchmaking.
In the same playlist. We don't have skill-based matchmaking, so players, you get in the game old school, OG style. If you're not good, that's your opportunity to get better.
This feels great.
You're using your ult. I got two.
Oh my.
Oh! The kill streak! I'm going crazy! I'm going X Games mode!
She knew it.
XDefiant re-entered the limelight amid closed beta sessions in April 2023, a period wherein it topped the Twitch charts with cumulative views outperforming the combined viewership numbers of Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone. As a result, talk of XDefiant potentially becoming a Call of Duty killer crescendoed, thanks to its arcadey gameplay that made many nostalgic for the Call of Duty of old. Ubisoft had no intention of keeping eager players waiting for much longer either, hosting an open beta that June to prepare the community and its servers for XDefiant's full launch later in the summer. At least, that was the plan. The open sessions lasted from June 21st through June 23rd, during which participants quickly identified lingering issues that plagued earlier test builds. Unreliable netcode counted among the most noteworthy troubles, as players reported hit registration errors wherein kill shots took several seconds to register. Concerns were also raised about the matchmaking and party invite systems, yet these shortcomings didn't prevent Ubisoft from keeping XDefiant's late summer launch window intact. However, news of the first public delay circulated in September 2023 after the arena shooter failed its certification process. Certification requires developers to send their games to first-party companies like Sony and Microsoft, so each can ensure the software follows its respective guidelines. Platform holders don't necessarily test for functionality bugs, though, instead focusing on compliance issues specific to the hardware. For example, Sony might deny certification for a game if it fails to properly track trophies on PlayStation consoles. Mark Rubin explained in a blog post that XDefiant entered certification at the end of July, with Ubisoft then eyeing a late August due date. The studio received a not pass verdict not too long thereafter, along with a list of must-fixes for the project's next submission. Rubin hoped XDefiant could be resubmitted and earn a certification pass in time for a release somewhere between mid-September and mid-October 2023. The public balked at Rubin's transparency given its rareness in such a notoriously secretive industry. However, the producer argued the community deserved honesty above all else. Ubisoft San Francisco kept up that attitude when XDefiant received an indefinite delay mere weeks later. According to a statement from developers, the public test session held in early October revealed just how much players enjoyed the fast-paced gunplay, objective-based modes, and unique maps. The testing period additionally unearthed some inconsistencies in the game experience that needed to be addressed before the pre-season rollout. Consequently, Ubisoft postponed XDefiant's release yet again, though the announcement lacked a new date. A longer message from Rubin noted user feedback played a role in the decision, since community members spotted frame spike issues related to the sliding mechanic that may have otherwise slipped through the cracks. The producer shared another progress update in January 2024, insisting developers had addressed the game's problematic netcode and instituted a refined party system after subjecting it to rigorous testing. In subsequent responses on social media, he also confirmed a Call of Duty-like prestige system as a feature the XDefiant crew was working to implement. Because of its early design stage, Rubin couldn't offer concrete details, but told followers the studio had its sights set on yearly prestiges instead of a seasonal model. Such remarks came under scrutiny a couple of months later after industry insider Tom Henderson cited sources claiming XDefiant's multiple delays were partially the fault of studio leadership's obsession with mirroring the feature set of its biggest competitor.
Bravo 6. Going dark.
Ubisoft stated in a February 2024 financial report that the shooter would release by March 31st of that same year. As the date drew closer without further news, Henderson spoke with anonymous sources who shed light on the internal struggles complicating XDefiant's production. Developers informed Henderson's Insider Gaming that, internally, the preseason had been slated to release before the end of February 2024. Allegedly, the missed milestone stemmed from the executive team's so-called never-ending hunt to chase Call of Duty by adding pointless stuff that often broke the work-in-progress build. Rubin wasted no time refuting the claims, telling fans new features had no influence on the delay, as little had changed from a gameplay standpoint since the public testing phase months prior. And as for the studio chasing the Activision series, Rubin said that part of Henderson's reporting prompted a major eye roll. On the contrary, the delay gave developers extra wiggle room to lock the game with bug fixes, updated netcode, and better social systems. Soon thereafter, more insider details from Henderson painted a picture that called into question Ubisoft San Francisco's management approach and transparency motto. Insider Gaming's late March report confirmed what Rubin had remarked about netcode constituting a substantial problem for XDefiant. However, sources alleged that a considerable amount of the production pitfalls stemmed from select executives and directors known for causing constant problems. Initially, this leadership group started small. Regular crew members nicknamed them the Boys Club, and within a couple of years, the inner circle welcomed a dozen or so male and female leads whose supposedly toxic behavior caused their subordinates to associate the Boys Club moniker with something more antagonistic. Staffers speaking under the condition of anonymity told Henderson that prior to the decision to abandon the Tom Clancy branding, XDefiant boasted a holiday 2021 launch window. Apparently, this pre-name change version featured none of the errors that beleaguered later builds. But the club's governance took a turn for the worse in 2022 once Ubisoft dropped the Clancy label. Removing his name permitted a greater range of freedom with respect to the content, so the club devised unwarranted changes, culminating in a chain reaction that stifled production progress. The warnings of concerned developers in the trenches went unheeded. Sources affirmed ego, a lack of work ethic, and unpleasant behavior from the Boys Club fostered unhealthy studio culture. One member of the protected class reportedly lacked pertinent experience, only receiving directorial powers because of personal connections. Such lapses in oversight meant developers were assigned tasks unrelated to their job description. Another higher-up at the San Francisco outpost allegedly had a history of treating junior staffers so badly that extensive HR reports had been filed against them in the past. Mandatory crunch compounded the situation, with it and the toxicity triggering mental breakdowns for some employees. Insider Gaming even spoke with developers from other Ubisoft studios who knew of the Boys Club and its unsavory reputation. As for the game-specific pitfalls, netcode counted among the primary culprits, one the studio had known about for years. Developers in the know insisted they'd sounded the alarm on countless occasions, giving their bosses months and years of notice about potential netcode hiccups in order to circumvent bigger troubles. Apparently, these words of caution were ignored because they came from beyond the club's inner circle. Not unlike the turbulent leadership woes, netcode errors became especially problematic after the Tom Clancy name change. The club began pushing for new maps, factions, and features that developers suddenly needed to build from the ground up. Again, internal feedback garnered no actionable response, and repurposing pre-existing assets to cut corners begat avoidable technical difficulties. And while an alleged Call of Duty obsession amongst the management group did not directly precipitate XDefiant's delay out of the March 2024 launch window, the staffers cited in the Insider Gaming report argued it had a deleterious effect on the project's overall health. Creative decisions for the final 2 years of production were supposedly bogged down by rhetorical questions like, what would Call of Duty do? One person recalled instances of leads nitpicking features until they more closely resembled those in the best-selling shooter series. Even if the requested tweaks met demands, members of the club occasionally found something else to fuss over, resulting in months-long rinse-and-repeat processes. One source estimated the frequent changes likely lengthened the development cycle by a year or more. Based on Insider Gaming's understanding of the situation, it seemed several new COD-inspired features were set aside for later seasons because of constant project pushbacks. This meant weapon challenges, kill cams, private matches, and kill streaks wouldn't appear at launch. The same held true for the Prestige system Mark Rubin mentioned earlier in 2024. Interestingly, the focus on transparency provoked internal frustrations as well, with staffers bemoaning how the social media messaging seldom reflected the real state of affairs, since some publicly teased features were touted as works in progress, despite never being broached in team discussions. Ubisoft finally set XDefiant's due date for May 21, 2024, at which point the pre-season would begin its 6-week run. The promised content included 5 factions, 5 game modes, 14 maps, and 24 weapons. The free-to-play title quickly amassed a sizable audience upon its debut on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series platforms and broke records to become the fastest game in Ubisoft history to hit 1 million users, a feat achieved in under 3 hours. That figure ballooned to an impressive 3 million unique players within 48 hours. By comparison, EA's wildly popular Apex Legends only topped 1 million players after 8 hours. At first blush, Ubisoft had a bona fide hit on its hands. Numerous growing pains surfaced out of the gate, however. Players struggled to get into matches. The problematic hit detection woes hadn't been resolved, and by day 2, users were calling weapon progression too slow. Speedy updates addressed glitches and the like. The team even swiftly tackled complaints regarding insufficient social features and bunny-hopping spam. The honeymoon phase faded as the problems piled up. One of the first blows landing due to a June 18 patch that overhauled weapon XP following weeks of fan complaints. Simply put, the rework reduced the amount of weapon XP required to level up guns, but introduced extra weapon mastery levels, thereby making players work harder and longer for skin unlocks. The backlash spread far and wide, such that Ubisoft San Francisco reversed course in a matter of days. Executive producer Mark Rubin said the initial change spawned from fears of players completing the weapon mastery grind too fast, potentially making progression rewards feel less special. He conceded that drastic alterations shouldn't have gone live after users had already invested effort towards progression. Amid these ups and downs, Ubisoft brass confessed its high hopes for XDefiant's future. CEO Yves Guillemot revealed the game's triumphant 11 million player milestone in a Ubisoft News interview, then shared his confidence that the player base would continuously grow as developers added fresh content and improvements. Guillemot also voiced an interest in XDefiant evolving into a serious esport, though he acknowledged the long road ahead.
Be advised, danger close.
Providing defense. Don't get between me and my objective.
Season 1's arrival in July 2024 marked but one hopeful step along the way, ushering in ranked playlists, the GSK faction from Rainbow Six, new maps, weapons, and Capture the Flag. And still, bugs, both old and new, beset the experience, prompting one player to ask Mark Rubin if developers had rushed out the title. Rubin cited the game engine as the catalyst behind a great many of XDefiant's technical flaws. XDefiant ran on Massive Entertainment's proprietary Snowdrop engine, responsible for powering titles such as The Division, Mario + Rabbids, and the South Park sequel. Before Ubisoft San Francisco, no studio had used Snowdrop for a first-person multiplayer shooter. Thus, as Rubin explained, all of the infrastructure for an FPS had to be built from scratch. The Herculean effort demanded tons of work, too, giving rise to glitches that games designed on bespoke FPS technology had already ironed out. Regardless of the reason for their existence, the bugs, along with the unstable netcode and middling content updates, contributed to the game's steep decline in the days and weeks following the Season 1 debut. The absence of accurate data made it impossible to determine exact player numbers, but members of the community claimed to have noticed a precipitous drop in activity throughout the month of July. At the end of August, reporting from Insider Gaming alleged XDefiant was on borrowed time. Sources said the shooter had been straining to even maintain 20,000 concurrents across all platforms, so Ubisoft bosses stressed the need for a drastic player count boost by the start of Season 3. Naturally, this compounded the pressure felt by developers already anxious about layoffs following Ubisoft cutting dozens of jobs at its San Francisco and North Carolina-based locations in mid-August. XDefiant developers were especially frustrated with studio leadership, believing a healthier work environment would have staved off the game's glaring missteps. Worst still, staffers told Insider Gaming the studio culture hadn't gotten better since the March 2024 report, despite the publisher completing an internal investigation that summer. Mark Rubin later asserted the arena shooter was far from dying, writing in a blog post that it was doing well. He swore his team had Ubisoft's full support and acknowledged that improvements geared towards progression, hit registration, and the long-struggling netcode would prove integral going forward. Ubisoft HQ had allocated more resources to help overcome these obstacles, but in the meantime, new and lapsed users were invited to join Season 2 upon its late September premiere. XDefiant's second season ushered in the Highwaymen faction from Far Cry New Dawn, more weapons, New Dawn-inspired maps, the bomb mode, and private matches. These additions and the various gameplay tweaks that accompanied them hardly did the troubled shooter any favors. 3 weeks after Season 2 arrived, yet another report about XDefiant's supposedly looming death made the rounds. Insider Sean Weber cited multiple sources who told him Ubisoft would pull support with Season 4, which marked the end of the Year 1 roadmap. Once again, Rubin denied the cancellation rumors, assuring fans that meetings about Year 2 were already underway. And as for why player numbers kept trending downward, the producer partly blamed XDefiant's minimal marketing, an apparently purposeful approach that gave the studio time to refine the experience before Ubisoft invested in a bigger advertising push. This thinking never panned out.
One more match.
On December 3rd, Rubin delivered a message announcing Ubisoft would deactivate XDefiant servers on June 3rd, 2025. New user registrations and downloads were immediately halted. Anyone who'd bought the Ultimate Founders Pack would be reimbursed, while players could expect refunds for purchases made within 30 days of the announcement. Rubin applauded the developers and Ubisoft for taking a chance on an old-school arcade shooter experience that tried shaking up the genre by foregoing skill-based matchmaking. But the free-to-play journey was a long one, and many such games took time to get their bearings and turn a profit. According to the executive producer, the San Francisco office and its parent company were prepared for the road ahead until very recently. In lieu of elaborating further, he simply stated that journey became too much to sensibly continue. The producer later lamented the lack of resources available ahead of release, which prevented the developers from ideally preparing launch content that wouldn't appear until seasonal updates started rolling out. Ubisoft's struggles as a whole likely didn't help in any attempts to secure XDefiant's future. During this period, Assassin's Creed Shadows had been postponed into the next fiscal quarter, not to mention the losses the business suffered on the heels of the underperforming Star Wars Outlaws. Approximately 300 employees were laid off as a result of the XDefiant's discontinuation. The publisher moved half the title's workforce into other roles within the company, shuttered its San Francisco and Osaka offices, and trimmed the size of the Sydney studio. These layoffs saw 143 San Francisco developers lose their jobs, and Variety reported 134 people were likely let go between Osaka and Sydney. Mark Rubin parted ways with the industry outright in 2025, sharing his hope that someone else can pick up the flag that he was trying to carry. At the very least, Ubisoft kept a small team on XDefiant to release its surprisingly large final update, aka the Season 3 patch. The update didn't solely include Season 3 content either. It additionally boasted features planned for Seasons 4 through 8. Season 3's Assassins faction entered the mix, for example, alongside the Wolves outfits scheduled for Season 4 and the Omega Force group meant for Season 5. In addition, 13 brand new maps became available, one being a locale inspired by Rayman that would have appeared as an epic event takeover in the 4th seasonal run. An experience called Tactical rounded out the massive update with gameplay centered around corridor-style maps. XDefiant fans were able to explore this deluge of content for about 5 months, accommodations not afforded to all canceled live service games. But this particular Ubisoft shooter wasn't like others in the games as a service space. As a crossover title, it tried appealing to a wide spectrum of players whose love of one franchise or another theoretically should have attracted and held their interest. Too many flaws and too many unforced errors prevented XDefiant from maintaining the momentum gained during its record-breaking launch. And there's reason to believe XDefiant was almost something else entirely, based on comments made by notable concept artist RJ Palmer, who claimed on social media that he'd worked on the project UB San Francisco was incubating before Mark Rubin was brought in to fix it. Allegedly, Rubin shelved the mystery game and steered the group's focus towards something in line with Call of Duty. XDefiant thus runs rampant with questions about what if and what could have been. In the end, all that matters is what was. XDefiant just so happened to be another in a long line of live service endeavors that couldn't compete in an oversaturated market. Want even more content from us? By joining us on Patreon, you'll be the first to access our newest videos, in addition to exclusive content and rewards you won't find anywhere else. Hit the link in the description and become part of the community today. Thank you. Your support is what keeps us going. Thank you for watching our video. We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous Patreons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier. Disco Cobra 2013, Ice Cold Water $1, Karu, Sauerkraut, Shuan Chinwin, Fat Green Dragon, and those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier: Boxed Mountains, Dave Oshry, DCX NG, DJ Redden, Edward Rains, Fallen Asterisk, It's Peanut Butter, Jaguar Knot, Jan Christofferson, Crash Course, Matthew McLaughlin, Pierre Burrell, C. Rob Kaysen. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to our channel and backing us on Patreon.